Henry Morgan, the pirate who burned an empire's greatest city and somehow became a Knight of England. At dawn in 1668, Welsh Captain Henry Morgan drives captured nuns and a young friar ahead of his men, forcing them to raise ladders against Portobello's walls. Spanish gunners hesitate rather than kill their own clergy. A shot slams into the dirt beside one nun, and she recoils, screaming in silent terror. Morgan himself never flinches. He watches from behind his men, calm and still, while stone and dust explode just feet away from the ladder. One buccaneer grips the rungs, cutlass clenched between his teeth. A musket ball rips into the stone inches from his climbing hand. The wall falls. Spanish soldiers can no longer fire without killing their own faithful, and Morgan's men pour over the ramparts by the dozen. Years earlier, a Welsh farm boy watched merchant ships leave harbour from the hills of Monmouthshire, dreaming of a life far from these fields. At 17, he signed on with an English fleet bound for the West Indies, chasing Spanish gold under Oliver Cromwell's grand imperial ambitions. Weeks at sea crammed men below deck like cargo. Beside him, a young soldier retched with fever, while the boy from Wales braced silently. Landing on Jamaica in 1655, he stumbled on hidden rocks under Spanish fire, smashing his face into stone and breaking his nose for life. A surgeon bandaged the wound while officers argued nearby. Their assault on Santo Domingo had already failed, and morale was crumbling fast. By his mid-20s, the Welsh captain had earned a place among Port Royal's hardened privateers, marked by scars and a permanently broken nose. In 1663, he sailed under veteran raider Christopher Mings, joining a bloody assault on the Mexican port of Campeche. Amid smoke and chaos, the young Welshman dragged a wounded comrade to safety, earning respect from men twice his age. Soon, seasoned captains sought his counsel in Port Royal's taverns, tracing raid routes across weathered maps by candlelight. By 1668, Jamaica's governor handed him an official commission, admiral of the entire privateer fleet, at just 32. Hundreds of buccaneers, English, French, Dutch, and freed slaves gathered at Isla Vache, answering his call to arms. Their first major target was Puerto Principe in Cuba, where his men swept through the square, dragging terrified townsfolk from their homes, hunting for hidden silver and gold. One grizzled captain warned that Portobello's walls had never fallen to any fleet in memory. The young Welshman listened in silence, then calmly overruled him. Under cover of darkness, his men rowed silent longboats toward the fortress coastline. Dawn was only hours away, and with it, the assault that would make his name. By dawn, Portobello belonged to him. His men swept the city empty, dragging the Spanish governor before him in chains, demanding an unthinkable ransom. He sent an ultimatum to Panama's governor: pay 100,000 pesos in silver, or watch Portobello burn to ash. A Spanish relief column marched to save the city. His men ambushed them in the jungle, scattering the soldiers in terror. The ransom arrived in full. His ship sailed home loaded with silver, the richest prize any privateer had ever taken. Port Royal erupted in celebration, streets filled with singing, drinking, and treasure divided among hundreds of cheering buccaneers. Away from the chaos, he returned home to his wife, Mary Elizabeth. A quiet life waited behind the legend. Jamaica's elite toasted him as a hero now. Governors and merchants who once scorned pirates welcomed him as their equal. By 1669, a new target called. Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela was rumored to hold Spanish treasure beyond counting. His fleet found Maracaibo already abandoned. Buccaneers tore through empty houses, searching every room for hidden silver. Pushing on to Gibraltar, his men seized terrified captives, demanding they reveal where the townspeople had buried their fortunes. Then came word that stopped him cold. 3 Spanish warships now sealed the only way out of the lagoon. His captain split into 2 furious camps at the news. Some begged him to surrender before the Spanish guns. Others swore they'd rather burn than kneel to Spain. He listened to every argument without a flicker of doubt. Then a rowboat carried his answer across the water. Clear the lagoon, or watch every Spanish ship burn. The Spanish admiral read the ultimatum and exploded with fury. He tore the letter to pieces on his own deck, vowing to sink every pirate ship before the sun rose again. Below deck, his men worked through the night. They packed a captured merchant ship with pitch, sulfur, and gunpowder, building a floating weapon meant to burn the Spanish fleet. By night, his men dressed logs as soldiers along the rail. They propped up crude wooden muskets and floppy hats, hoping the darkness would fool Spanish eyes come dawn. At sunrise, the disguised fireship sailed straight toward the towering Spanish flagship. 2 brave men steered it on course, then leapt overboard into the water at the final second. Grappling hooks locked the 2 hulls together as flames tore up the tarred rigging. Sailors hacked frantically at the burning ropes, desperate to break free. Seconds later, the flagship exploded, hurling burning wreckage across the lake. The young captain watched calmly from his own deck, utterly unflinching. A second Spanish warship burned by its own crew rather than surrender. A third was seized outright, sailors dropping their swords instantly. On the shore, the Spanish admiral watched his fleet die in flames, fists clenched in fury. The Welsh captain stood silent, quietly satisfied. Under cover of night, he tricked the fort into aiming its cannons inland, then slipped his entire fleet past in silence. By morning, they were safely at sea, the lagoon and its guns shrinking behind them. His men finally allowed themselves to breathe. Back in Port Royal, he proposed an impossible target. Panama, the richest city in the New World, thought untouchable by any raider. Word spread fast. Hundreds of buccaneers flooded the docks, provisioning the largest, most ambitious fleet he had ever commanded. For days his men hacked through dense jungle, chasing an enemy that burned villages and fields before them, morale crumbling with every mile. Food ran out completely. Starving men boiled old leather straps into broth, forcing down the tough strips just to keep marching. Spanish herders drove a stampede of wild bulls straight at his line, hoping panic would break their formation before the real battle began. His men held firm and fired through the chaos, scattering both bulls and soldiers as the Spanish defense collapsed within minutes. As they entered the city, flames erupted across it. Spanish hands or accident, no one could ever say for certain. By the time the fire died, the fabled treasure was long gone. His men found only ash and empty vaults. On the march back, resentment simmered among his men. Quiet whispers that their captain had kept the richest spoils for himself. His men circled him at the fire, demanding shares of treasure that had somehow already disappeared, suspicion darkening every face around him. Weeks later, a ship brought grim news. England and Spain had signed peace before Panama ever burned, making his raid an act of piracy. English officers arrested him without warning, binding his wrists in iron chains before a stunned crowd who had once cheered his name. Months at sea followed, locked below deck as a prisoner, watching the same ocean that once carried him toward glory. In London, everyone expected punishment. Instead, the king knighted him before the entire royal court, stunning every witness in the hall. He returned to Jamaica as governor, now hunting the very buccaneers who once called him captain and brother. By 1688, age and illness finally caught him. He died quietly in his own bed, the storm of his life falling silent at last. 4 years after his death, an earthquake swallowed Port Royal whole, sinking his grave into the sea forever. Henry Morgan. The only pirate history ever turned into a knight. Buried beneath the city he once ruled, lost to the sea forever. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more legendary stories from history's darkest and greatest figures.